Morning or afternoon, everyone in the Certificate for Community Services. Just a little follow-up video that I'm going to put together. In the first instance, this is for the assess coexisting needs, just those reflective questions that follow on from your role play about June, and most people at this stage have completed that. But when you get to do these part 2 review and reflection questions, question 1 says, so in response to your role play, and which was an intake assessment, so identify and discuss 2 potential risk factors and appropriate strategies for service delivery in this situation. And it's quite specific in the way that the assessors or the people that develop the assessment were thinking in this case. They're really coming from that workplace health and safety, that WHS perspective, and thinking about you as a worker alone in a meeting room with Arjun. And I guess what they would like you to consider, what could potentially go wrong from a aggressive behaviour perspective or challenging behaviour perspective, whether that's verbal aggression, is it perhaps physical aggression, aggression against property, where does that place you as a worker in terms of safety, and perhaps in the worst scenario, if property is destroyed or a worker is assaulted, that becomes a matter that can be reported or should be reported to the police. The police will inquire and becomes that into that legal process. And it is, one word against another word and those sort of complexities. So what they really want you to consider in terms of workplace policies and procedures, is there anything in policies and procedures that maybe could be considered or reviewed to consider violence? And I guess what that considerations could be that you've got a male client and a female worker in most of our cases. In our experience in the role play, is it a better policy to have 2 workers to do the initial intake interview just to be certain and be sure, to maximise that safety? Is it about extra training to just ensure that they're extra, people have been skilled and trained to deal with those challenging behaviours and the best approaches to stay safe, things like what to say, where to position yourself, escape routes, making sure that they've all been considered. But of course there are also extra costs. If you've got 2 people in the meeting, 2 workers in the meeting, is that extra costs? What's the best way forward is what they really want you to consider, and policies and procedures there that might need reviewing and updating just to consider the safety of everyone, and in particular I guess gender, male client, female worker might be a consideration to be specific about. And also I guess what came out in the meeting that Arjun had been using some alcohol, and maybe that's impacted on his ability to control some strong emotions at times. So maybe that's not known until you get into the meeting. But again, is that something to consider in the policies and procedures? So that's the gist of question 1. Question 2 says, identify and discuss 2 ways you could seek feedback on the way you handled the intake assessment to allow you to reflect on your own performance and explain why each option provided is appropriate. So what to consider, and this is the sort of stuff that you might have already considered, but debriefing with the supervisor, just being able to and fro, and you can sort of talk about perhaps any challenges that you might have encountered and get some feedback in that way. If it was the worst scenario, and like we just spoke about in question 1, there was some property damage, violence, or even assault, there is the Employee Assistance Program, so the EAS, where you can access free and confidential emotional support and counselling for people who are employed in this state. And certainly I've had access to that in the past as a TAFE employee. It's free, as I said, it's really good. I guess extra training could be a consideration, and we spoke about that in question 1, but the idea of dealing with challenging behaviours, staying safe, and being able to be, adaptive and change your approach depending on the situations as they arise. And I guess some sort of professional development plan is always a good thing. I've got one now. I've had one most of my career in various organisations. I guess some organisations are a little bit more proactive in making sure that those things are acted upon and followed through and reviewed regularly. So I've had I guess, a bit of a varied experience in terms of that professional development planning and getting some feedback and identifying what training I want and following that through. But that would be something that I would consider into reflecting on performance and the way forward that you could consider in that question. Question 3, from your reflection on your performance in the role play, identify and discuss 2 ways you could improve your skills in assessing people with coexisting needs. So I guess remember that, the basics of this, the coexisting needs is when people present with more than one issue, and I guess that's going to be the case, and I said this in the very start, that's probably everyone we deal with has got more than one existing need, so coexisting. I guess there's a little bit of a follow-up here from some of the previous questions, but having a good mentor and peer support would be a way to improve your skills, as in ensuring that you're familiar with and can follow the workplace policies and procedures and protocols that are in place to make sure everyone is safe and operating at best, keeping your documentation accurate and clear, and just in case it has to go to that there's some sort of a legal action that needs to get a look and subpoena those notes. So that's another time when notes can be looked at by someone else other than the client and yourself and the service, but through a court process for perhaps it's investigating another crime in the community and need to look at the notes. But again, if it was a crime in the service, then your notes may be part of that process. Some sort of risk assessment process could be important, and documenting that clearly. Again, that ongoing supervision and support and good training to improve skills. So there's a little bit of a double up of info from some of those questions, but that's okay. Question 4, from your reflection on your performance in the role play, outline the skills you will use in the future to work with a person to empower them from a strengths-based perspective. And I guess that's a very important point. Getting and working with people's strengths is obviously a very, very good thing to do. Engagement, and people are more motivated and can see that they're valued and have good things about their story. So I'll just reflect on some of the things that I saw that was really good in a lot of cases. And a lot of people, when I was speaking through, they did talk about the strengths that they did identify. So just reflect on those sorts of things in your answer. But I just, in the first instance, allowing someone the space to tell their story. I know you had to get through that initial, name, address, all the legal stuff, the confidentiality, the duty of care, the mandatory reporting, the release of information and consent. So all that sort of stuff was covered. Then at some point, that good open question to hear the story and allow people to tell their story, and without sort of being judgmental, all those active listening skills, and someone did specifically, or more than one person specifically mentioned, using empathy just to I guess validate someone is experiencing something real. Open questions, getting people to expand upon and tell their story more. And I think some of the strengths that were identified is that in the group were things like Arjun being a male, and perhaps from a culture where, male toughness or ability to provide, or, you're a failure if you're unemployed or injured or weak, all those sorts of things, but acknowledging the strength in coming forward and talking, the strength of taking that risk to move states, if you like, and try and start again. And the strength of coming and telling his story and looking for options, and I guess validating that as real. And what all the other strengths that I guess you could identify, having those skills and tickets, and whether that's, I guess we spoke about the strengths and the resilience to look at perhaps other tickets or training in there as well. The relationships counselling, he was willing to express that and talk about that. So there's another strength. So we're not focusing on what he hasn't got or can't do or not willing to do necessarily.